If you had the power over the element of fire, what would you do with it? Would you use it to benefit yourself, or would you use it to benefit others? Greetings, my friends. Welcome back. Today's story, we are travelling to the land of Ireland once again, where we will meet a man who had the power over the element of fire. This is the story of Louis and the 5 streams of fire. In the land of Ireland, near the River Shannon by Ballina, there lived Louis Delbraeth. He was a powerful druid. He was nicknamed the Fire Maker, for he was able to create and manipulate fire with his mind and with the power of his speech. He was so powerful that he could even use fire to predict the future. Whether it was through a roaring bonfire, a humble hearth, or the flickering flame of a candle, he was able to see into it. And the things he saw were clans warring, love blossoming and being born in summer, and of course, the frequent goings-ons of the kings of Ireland. Being this powerful druid that he was exempt from war. He was also exempt from paying tithes, which means he accumulated a lot of wealth. He had vast amounts of land, and he was lucky enough and noble enough to have 3 wives. Yeah, 3 wives. And from those 3 wives, he bore 7 children, 1 daughter and 6 sons. His daughter Deirdre, she ended up marrying. She married a man called Trad. Now, Trad was a bit of an unsavoury character. He was a poor farmer for starters. He had no idea how to work his land properly, what little he had. Because of this, he enjoyed ploughing and sowing in the embrace of his own wife, rather than going out to tend to his barren fields. And because of this, their family grew and grew and grew and grew. There were so many children running around, it was unreal. It was like a tsunami of children. And this caused a bit of a problem. There wasn't enough food to go around, because when you have a big family, you need a big amount of land to tend to and to yield food, obviously. But Trad, being Trad, he had no idea how to do this properly. And he was in desperate straits. And this caused him to go to his father-in-law, Louis, and ask to him to use his druid powers to divine an answer, a solution to his problem with land. Louis was very skeptical about this, but he agreed. He couldn't deny his own son-in-law. So he asked Trad to make offerings, first to the spirits of the land, and the second to the goddess Brigid, goddess of the flame and well, and among other things. I've talked about Brigid before. So he cast gold and silver into the goddess's well and prayed for blessings and guidance. He gifted many things to the spirits of the land, and then he went to go and find Louis in his humble hut. This was a thing he built on his land, but away from the hustle and bustle of the children, farm life, and also the attention of his many wives. It was in this humble abode where he performed his magic, consulted the oracles from the other world to get his prophecies. Louis made up his altar with his offerings and a pit, a sort of a little dish, a bowl of things that were flammable to create this fire. When Trad arrived, he bade Trad to come beside him at his altar. And with the spell of incantation in his mind and his lips, Louis created a very strong fire. He gave prayers out to the spirits of the land and also to the goddess Bridget, so that he may receive this prophecy, this vision of the future. And suddenly the flames got bigger and it got hotter and the colour started to deepen, and something came over Louis. It was like the goddess herself was giving a sort of inspiration. The imbas was flowing through his mind, his eyes were starting to gloss over, and it was as if Bridget herself was commanding his body and his words. In this state of trance, he pointed at Trad, turned his head to look at him, and said, with the words of the goddess, "Hear this now. Ask any man to surrender his land, and he will be honor bound to do so." And with that, the fire died down until all that was left in the offering bowl was smouldering embers and burned kindling and peat. His eyes returned to normal, and he turned to look at Trad. And Trad was smiling, but he had the most evil look in his eye. And even Louis, with his great powers of foresight, could not predict what Trad would do next. Trad stood to his feet, pointed at Louis, and said, "Then I ask you, Louis Delbraeth, to surrender your land to me." Shocked and taken a gasp, Louis was furious, but he was honor bound. So, Louis ended up surrendering his vast lands to Trad. Deirdre was absolutely furious and also deeply saddened. She could not believe that Trad would do such an evil thing. But in the back of her mind, she kind of knew that it might had to have been this way. With the amount of children they had, they needed the lands. And even though both Deirdre and Louis all knew that Trad would not look after the land properly, it would go to squander, they both knew it, but they accepted it. Louis and the rest of the family packed all of their things into a cart and they headed off away, Deirdre choking back tears as they left. Louis was in a bit of a ponder. He was very confused. He was angry, of course, but he was very confused. He didn't know why Trad picked him when he could have picked anybody else. But also, what was he going to do? He still had sons and he still had the 3 wives. What was he going to do? But he had faith. He had faith that the gods and the land would provide. So they crossed the Shannon at Ballina and headed east towards Carn Fiacha, where they came across a lake. And this lake was a good, substantial lake for fishing. Surrounding it was a lush forest and enough room to settle down, have a small amount of land to farm, but for what they had, it was decent enough. So they camped there, they erected a home, and after a while it became good once again. But one night, while Louis was asleep, he felt another sort of almost a possession once again. Maybe it was the goddess, maybe it was the spirits of fire that he was so used to communing with. And then suddenly he awoke with this thought ringing in his head. I need to burn something. I need a big fire this time. So he decided to make a bonfire. And it was going to be the most biggest bonfire that the land of Ireland had ever seen. His entire family brought wood and kindling from all sorts. And it was the most biggest bonfire you'd ever seen, taller than a man. And with the power of incantation on his lips, he called forth another big fire, but this time it erupted from the wood and peats and kindling into this gigantic column of flames, ever rising into the sky. And flickers of fire would change color. They would go from red to blue to green, as if all the elements and all the spirits would dance within this massive column, giving it this perfect illumination. And he once again communed and asked of the spirits and the goddess of what he should do now and what will become of his family. Suddenly, the column bursts into 5 streams that trickled down onto the floor and branched out in different directions. And then they heard the voice of Bridget say, "Keep your youngest son, Nos, close to your home, because I fear you may need him. But your other 5 sons will follow whichever stream they choose, and wherever they land, they will be prosperous. And they will always come to this one bonfire from wherever they came from, on Imbolc and Beltane and Lunasa and Samhain, to remember what they once had and what they will gain in the future." And so they did. Each of the sons went and followed their directions and lived prosperously from then on. Louis lived a long life, but he ended up, as we all do, succumbing to old age and eventually death. He was buried beside Lughaid, and there is a great burial mound, an ancient barrow that is said to hold his body. And if a particular individual, a budding magician, a budding bard, even a great sage, if they were to go to the burial mound, if they were to sleep on its mound underneath the starry sky, they will catch a vision of Louis sat down next to them, conjuring a small fire on the floor without ever needing wood or ever needing to speak. And he would smile to you gladly, and he would impart wisdom. And among the wisdom would be the same story that I have just told you. And that was the story of Louis and the 5 streams of fire. There's a very interesting story, and it comes back to the same question that I asked at the beginning of this video. If you had the power of fire like Louis did, what would you do with it? Some would go down the trad route and decide, no, I'm going to use it to further my own gains and make my life easy. But I hope that many choose the path of Louis to help others and use the gift of the element of fire for good, especially as we will be almost coming up to one of the festivals mentioned in the story, Beltane. Well, thank you, my friends, for watching. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this story. Safe travels, my friends, and I hope to see you again very soon. You take care.